Oh, I feel filled. And now we will return to our special guest, Margaret Kimberly. Margaret, please continue to share your brilliance, your wisdom, and your love with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The ancestors whose names I put in the chat were my parents, my late parents, Bernard Walton and Calvin Walton, who I dedicated my book to, and Ashe for my mom and my dad. Yes, so today is, Juneteenth is a very significant day. And there's a lot to learn from it. The history that I was speaking to earlier, but I think there's some serious things that we have to consider even as we commemorate this day. What is freedom? It is said that the people of Galveston, Texas found out that they had been freed some 2 years ago, but as I pointed out, the Emancipation Proclamation applied to people who were still under Confederate control. So whether they knew about the Emancipation Proclamation or not, they still were not free unless they managed to escape. And at the end of the war, people were free, but the end of chattel slavery was not what it should have been. There was immediate reaction. Lincoln's successor, Andrew Johnson, did everything he could to thwart all of the promise of Reconstruction. Once the Southern, the Confederates, once they reestablished themselves politically, Reconstruction ended. A presidential election in 1876. It was always tenuous. And in 1876, the last federal troops were moved from the South. But even before that time, the willingness to fight for the rights of the formerly enslaved had waned. Those people who were the so-called radical Republicans, those people who had been clearly anti-slavery and wanted the nation to put the full weight of its power behind defending the rights of Black people, were defeated politically. And so freedom was tenuous, and we had those, the 3 constitutional amendments after the war, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, birthright citizenship. But the 13th Amendment was problematic. It said people could be held against their will if they committed a crime, and that they could be forced to labor if they committed a crime. So now we have some of the clothes we wear are made by people in prison who are paid a pittance if they're paid at all. We had Reconstruction thwarted, followed by decades of Jim Crow segregation. So freedom was never complete, but as I said before, as during the Civil War, whenever Black people improved, and whenever our lot improved, whenever our situation improved, it was because we made the demand, because we acted en masse. And we talk a lot about the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, and everyone claims to revere that time, but too often I find without talking about what the people did. Anything Lyndon Johnson did or any politician did, it's because the people were in movement and created a political crisis and did not have an allegiance to any political party. Someone pointed out to me that most Black people lived in the South. Actually, that's still true, but most Black people lived in the South and could not vote, but they were the ones, because they did not give up, because of their struggle, they got the right to vote. So what does that tell us? It tells us that the Our electoral system has its limits. I wouldn't tell anyone not to vote, not to be involved in electoral politics, but unless you have a counter force of a mass movement, it has its limitations. And so we see ourselves now in 2020, and this year, there have been recent events which have propelled Juneteenth into the spotlight, the media spotlight and the political spotlight. Everything changed in this country. It's as if time stopped when a man named George Floyd was killed by the police on May 25th. Someone whose name we did not know until that time. But the country has changed a lot in just a few short weeks. The revulsion, the outrage that people experienced upon seeing this man murdered by police was nearly universal. And it was quite different this time. It was clear that the usual means of mollifying angry people, well, we're going to fire the cops right away and that should quiet people down, but it didn't. And then they fired, but I'm convinced, and I think we have to talk about the people want to, most of us would like peaceful protest. But it was not so peaceful protest, I believe, which pushed the prosecutors in Minnesota to finally charge him and the other officers. I believe had the police precinct not been burned, they were trying to get away with not charging him or making minimal charges against him. And that's a difficult thing. And I don't want to tell people that that's the sort of thing they should pursue. That's very dangerous. And the state can really comes down on people like a ton of bricks. A lot of harm can come to individuals. So it's not something that I would have told someone to do. But at the same time, I think we have to recognize that just as with the end of chattel slavery, it was a war that ended slavery. And it was people who went to that next stage beyond peaceful protest, which pushed the system to at least consider bringing some justice to this situation. And so after George Floyd's killing, people across the country and around the world have risen up in protest, and not just about him. I think it's important to point out the implications of these events and point out the fact that there were many angry people, many people struggling before May 25th. We're always told something phony about this country, about the economy or jobs growth. But half the American people are low income. And then in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, millions, literally 35 million newly unemployed people, a system which, a state that so failed it would not even allow them to apply for the benefits, access the benefits they were entitled to. The pandemic itself, which had such a disproportionate impact on Black people. There are places in this country where the only people who died of COVID-19 were Black. So we had this situation that was just waiting for a spark. And what has the response been? Very heroic response on the part of most people, but we also have to be careful that corporations are now celebrating Juneteenth. I went to the bank earlier only to find out that in observance of Juneteenth, the Chase Bank closed early, closed at 1 o'clock. And I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to Governor Cuomo saying that Juneteenth this year would be a state holiday, and that it is for many corporations and cities and states across the country. But Governor Cuomo also said he saw no reason for any further police reforms other than the ones that the legislature just enacted. So any talk of community control of the police, which I think is far more important than defunding the police, that's problematic, But any talk of any of the radical reforms, people are now talking about police abolition and prison abolition, and we should be. So we have to be careful when people like the governor suddenly pander, because I don't believe there's true sincerity, that members of Congress think that if they take a knee and wear a kente cloth, that that's good enough. Before we came on this online meeting, I saw that Senate Democrats have voted to make Juneteenth a national holiday. Well, I'm not against that, but we have to be very careful about what is celebrated, why is it celebrated. I don't want our congressional leaders just to name holidays. There are many things in this country that have to change in order to finally make good on this claim of freedom that we have in this country, or that we are said to have. So we have to be careful. We have to commemorate. This is a day worthy of celebration. It's a day that's very significant in our nation's history, but we have to be very careful how it can be used by people who, quite frankly, can be bad actors in our story. And I want to go back to the 1860s, and I want to talk a little more about Abraham Lincoln. I touched on the fact that he was not anti-slavery, as we have been told, but until the end of his life, he worked on what were called colonization efforts. That is to send Black people out of the country. And the day before he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, he also signed a directive to come up with a colonization plan. He had an office of colonization. That one such colony actually came into being briefly. It was off the coast of Haiti, and several hundred people were sent there. As late as a couple of weeks before he was assassinated, he spoke to General Benjamin Butler, the one who first began keeping enslaved people as contrabands of war, and asked him to come up with a plan to send Black people out of the country. So even as we remember, we must remember the truth, the whole truth and nothing but, as we're asked to when we take an oath in court. My book, Presidential Black American the Presidents, goes into this in some detail, but I also want to mention that when I was researching my book, it became clear to me very quickly that a lot of our history is deliberately left out. There are historians who are more concerned with being in the elite. They're more concerned with being, with affirming the system than they are with being truthful. The information I present is not secret. If you're interested, as soon as you do the research, this information comes out at you, and yet we don't see it. And that is something we should remember also. Because, one of the ways that people can be co-opted is with language. So everyone says Black Lives Matter. Now we see people with money, corporations saying, or foundations, they will give X number of dollars to Black businesses or to Black organizations. I'm not against that, but we have to be clear. Many times these are efforts to mollify the people and to keep people quiet and to get them to stop protesting, to stop making demands. So we have to be very careful. We have to be watchful, even as people say they want the things that we want. So I'm all in favor of more people knowing about Juneteenth, but I think it's important for us to know the entire history. And by the way, one of the things I discovered in my research was that Lincoln was willing to compensate the South, compensate the slaveholders who had created this bloodshed when they started the war, to compensate them to the tune of millions of dollars, that he was willing to let them end slavery gradually, and that he was willing to give them until 1900 He was willing to have an additional 35 years of slavery in order to create this white people's country. There's a great book for those of you who are, if you are a history buff and you want to read a book that's several hundred pages long. It's written by the late Lerone Bennett, and it's called Abraham Lincoln's White Dream. And I do recommend it for those of you who may be so inclined to read it. He goes into detail about some of the things that I've talked about here. But when you delve into history, you see that repeated time and time again, that there are always powerful people who go out of their way to restrict change. And we're seeing that now, where people think they can take a knee or say Black Lives Matter or make Juneteenth the holiday, any number of things, but their goal is not our goal, or the goal that I'm assuming everyone on this call has. I'm assuming everyone here is someone who wants to see a more just country and a more just world. And we have to, and I want to add parenthetically, we have to work for a just world. We're not going to have justice in this country, but injustice abroad. I think we have to make the connections between oppression here and oppression around the world. You cannot have justice in a country where 60% of the federal government's budget goes for defense spending. You cannot have justice in a country where police departments get surplus Defense Department equipment and militarize the already overly militarized police. You can't have justice if the United States claims a right to enact sanctions, which are war by other means, which are just as deadly as bullets and bombs. So those are longer stories. But the struggle is quite real. The struggle is always bigger than we know. But this is a moment for us to be brave, like the people who endured enslavement, yet rose to free themselves, to fight for the country, and as much as they could to fight for justice for themselves, which ended up being justice for everyone. You know, there were no public school systems or very few in this country until Reconstruction. So that is an example of the way that the liberation struggle for Black people benefited the entire country. And so that's what I want to leave you with. I'm going to say happy Juneteenth. And I hope we always celebrate, we always commemorate, we always remember the importance of this day, but that we do so with caution. The people who are often called leaders, who are referred to as leaders, oftentimes are not. And many of them are wolves in sheep's clothing. And I don't believe I am being harsh, but I believe I'm being accurate also. So everybody saying happy Juneteenth is not someone to be trusted, is not someone to be followed without question. So I think my time is up. I want to leave some time for some questions and discussions in case anybody has anything they want to point out or to ask me. And once again, I thank you for this opportunity. I hope my words were useful to you on this Juneteenth. Thank you.
Miss Margaret Kimberly, a force of nature, thank you for speaking such truth to power. Thank you so much for what you've given us thus far. I have to read your book. What I'd like us to do is hear from Reggie, have another song, and then we will have Q&A with you. We'll have Ms. Rose Creighton join us with her remarks, and we'll take it from there. Let's have another song from Reggie Harris.
Greetings, friends. You know, the times may be challenging, the work may be hard, but we have each other, and we're ready to go. been sitting here thinking about the word today. Oh, glory, hallelujah. Got a lot on my mind, but I'm blessed to say, glory, hallelujah, I'm ready to go. We're all living in a world turned upside down. Oh, glory, hallelujah. Gonna take some time to turn it around. Glory, hallelujah, I'm ready to go. Oh, mama, it's a long, long road. You got me singing with the seed you sowed. It's up to me, so come what may. Glory, hallelujah, it's a righteous day. Glory, hallelujah, I'm on my way. We got a world of trouble and a world of pain. Oh, glory, hallelujah. They keep spinning the truth in freedom's name. Glory, hallelujah, I'm ready to go. When the haters pull up, I just sing my song. Oh, glory, hallelujah. Keeps my mind on track, keeps my spirit strong. Glory, hallelujah, I'm ready to go. Oh, mama, it's a long, long road. You got me singing with the seed you sowed. It's up to me, so come what may. Glory, hallelujah, it's a righteous day. Glory, hallelujah, I'm on my way. I can't do this all by myself. Oh, glory, hallelujah. It's a long, hard journey, gonna need some help. Glory, hallelujah, I'm ready to go. Well, I've been sitting here thinking about the word of the day. Oh, glory, hallelujah. Got friends by my side and I'm blessed to say, glory, hallelujah, I'm ready to go. Oh, mama, it's a long, long road. You got me singing with the seed you sowed. It's up to me, so come what may. Glory, hallelujah, it's a righteous day. Glory, hallelujah, I'm on my way. Oh, mama, it's a long, long road. You got me singing with the seed you sowed. Up to me, so come what may. Glory, hallelujah, it's a righteous day. Glory, hallelujah, I'm on my way.
Oh, Reggie, thank you so much. And Rose, you are on.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to say thank you to the two people I invited to participate, to Thorin and to especially to Margaret. I think were her very informative remarks. And looking forward to next year.
So let's see if we have questions for Miss Kimberly. Do we have questions? Who has a question that they would like to pose?
David from Brooklyn.
David, are you muted?
No, I'm not muted.
Please proceed with your question, David.
Okay, yes, my question is, do you think it's really possible to have liberty and justice for all under a system of a that we live of imperialism. The United States is a country of empire, and it seems to me a contradiction to talk about a place where we have democracy and have empire. I don't think that's possible.
Yes, I agree. I agree with you completely, and I question whether we have a democracy. That's one of the things that we need to be honest about. Just being able to vote every few years is not what makes a nation democratic. It is government by the people, is it not? But we have a political system where people with money have access. They work hand in hand with the corporate media to lie, to obfuscate. We have political parties who are beholden to the donor class. All of these things are proof that we do not have a democratic system, but we don't even live up to the term that we're always told that we're a democracy. We're we're better or different from most of the rest of the world. And many countries in the world don't have democracies as a result of American interference in their affairs. But I always feel like we should say that. But you're absolutely right. You cannot have a democracy when you have the US practicing aggression all over the world. It's not possible. We can't have democracy when we don't even have our basic needs met because of the system of empire, which takes money away from us and doesn't allow us for our needs to be met. Look at what happened with COVID-19. We had a quarantine that put millions of people out of work, and the government's response is a one-time payment of $1,200 at the most. And people who are unemployed getting, when they finally were able to access their benefits, getting little extra money, but nothing close to making people whole. This is a year that has exposed that the US is a failed state and does not function in a democratic way.
Thank you so much for the question and the response. Other questions? This would be the moment.
I do have a question. I'm sorry, I don't know if it's Professor Kimberly or Dr. Kimberly, but thank you for your talk. And I wonder if you think we will be successful in eliminating the Electoral College, and if we'll be successful in getting public funding for campaigns.
Not at this moment, not in 2020. The Electoral College, we would need a constitutional amendment. It's been some decades since there was a successful constitutional amendment. It requires 2/3 majority, both houses of Congress, the president signing, and then 2/3 of the states. A lot of states benefit from the Electoral College. We have one political party, the Republicans. They lost 2 elections in the past 20 years and still managed to get the presidency through this system. So it can be done, but it's, one thing I wanted to say, we need more grassroots activism and organizing that we had once in decades past. I think that's happening, but it would take a concerted effort. It is absolutely possible. It can be done. But in the meantime, we have to have political parties that really care about the franchise. And we have one, the Democrats. I always say Democrats depend on Black votes, but they wish they didn't. After those 2 elections, and look at what we see now. Joe Biden can't win unless the Democrats are serious with a voter outreach campaign. I know it's 5 months away, but I would hope to see more than I've seen so far. And that's where the democracy comes in. We can't have these parties that exhort us to vote and don't want us to do anything else. And then they don't even help people to practice that right.
Hello?
And another there's no constitutionally protected right to vote.
Right.
That is another constitutional amendment that I think we definitely ought to have.
Yeah. Hello?
Can you
Hello?
speak a little more about that? Because I don't know about that.
Sure. There's nothing in the Constitution that says a citizen has the right to vote. And we've had legislation, so we had the Voting Rights Act, but that was gutted when Democrats allowed the Republicans to take over so many state houses and take over the federal judiciary. And in case you can't tell, I'm not a fan of the Democratic Party because they pretend to be the party of the people when they are not. But there's no constitutionally protected right to vote. And that's why they're able to get away with voter suppression and ID laws and all felon disenfranchisement, all sorts of means of restricting the franchise.
Yes, I have a question.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Hello?
Yes, yes.
Yes,
Hello.
please.
Hello, Margaret. How are you? I'm Russell Yates.
Hi.
I'm friends with Faye Lloyd. I think she's listening, watching right now. Listen, my question is, it's like a two-parter. I once heard someone say, America is not a country, it's a business. So my question to you is, America a country or is America a business?
It's a country that puts business first. Who said business of America is business? Corporate control is pretty much complete in this country. We have a government that serves corporate interests
Yes.
in its legislation and its actions around the world.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, the second part of your question, the other person who asked was about campaign finance reform, and that's another thing that we would have to work hard on. I think it's possible to do, however. But corporate needs are first and foremost. We've seen legislation from the COVID-19, the CARES Act, the stimulus funding. It's people who are already rich, it's corporations who already had billions of dollars who got more help rather than individuals and small businesses. But I think this means that we're going to need something revolutionary. And the word revolution is a scary word, but I don't think we should be afraid of it. I think we ought to be afraid of the status quo. We ought to be afraid of what we have now, that where billionaires pay no taxes, where those of us who are middle-income people have paid taxes at a higher rate, where Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the world, but Amazon doesn't pay any taxes. Those are the things that I think you're referring to, where we have a nation, but it doesn't put the interests of the nation first.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We'll just entertain one last question. If anyone has a last question for our guest.
Dr. Janice, there is a question in the chat from Diana Scott.
Yes, please. Yes, please, Errol. Thank you.
Will we be successful in getting a ballot by mail option nationally in November and enough funding for the post office now to enable full voting in 2020? And how do we make sure this happens?
I think we have to put pressure on our elected officials to make this happen. COVID has, here in New York, I know the primary is next week, I believe. No primary in the neighborhood I live in, no races that are primary, but we're able to get ballots by mail. We should start here in New York State. I believe that absentee voting should be automatic. I believe everyone should get an absentee ballot. You should be able to vote absentee for any reason. Any of you who have voted absentee in New York know you're supposed to give a reason, and you're swearing that you're out of the country, or you're having brain surgery, or you're 95 years old, or and that's the reason you ought to get an absentee ballot. You should get one for any reason. It should be as easy as possible. I think COVID will help in getting vote by mail. You know, there's a state, I believe it's Oregon, where they only have vote by mail. They have no polling places. They got rid of all of them. So it can be done. It can be done all over the country, but that's something else we're going to have to fight for. If you're a Democrat, your party's in minority, but that's something we have to pressure them on, and we have to stop letting them get away with this lesser evil business, because it amounts to them basically telling you to go away. If you ask a question, if you make a demand, if you have a criticism, it's, well, you know, you could have Trump, and it lets them off the hook. So I also say that when you hear that we must push back against that and not accept crumbs and let them use Trump as a foil who lets them get away with doing as little as they possibly can.